Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to welcome you to our new podcast episode of today's Top Tech Leaders. The goal of this podcast is to share insights and knowledge of top CTOs and product leaders on their leadership and what they've learned throughout their journey. We'll cover management tips and tricks, organizational structures, tools, and best practices on how to successfully lead your product team. Our goal is to bring valuable insights to CTOs and CPOs of all seniority. I myself am Marc Clemens, the founder and CEO of CodeControl 9M, and for today's podcast, I'm thrilled to have Filip as our guest. Filip is the co-founder and CTO at randevu.tech, truly passionate about building cutting-edge software, moved to Berlin about 15 years ago, where he co-founded another 2 companies. Welcome, Filip. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me.
So, before we dive into our topic, which is today, from a corporate employee to a startup founder, it would be nice to hear a bit about yourself, what you're working on at the moment. What is Randevu?
Sure. Filip, I'm originally from Serbia. As you mentioned, I moved almost 15 years ago back to Germany with a dream to play volleyball. And I failed in that. So I kind of pivoted from professional volleyball player to professional tech nerd and learned German, by mistake also a bit of Swedish and Swabian as well, and finished my university's master's and bachelor's in Germany. I was working as a tech. Long story short, currently now at randevu.tech, we are a backend solution, API first solution for building marketplace businesses in a way that we cut down the development time by at least half, as well as the total cost of ownership by reducing your required tech team size. So in other words, our customers are marketplace businesses that use our tech to build their products and grow their business.
Really nice. Super interesting. Well, and how did you end up starting that company, and how did you end up becoming a CTO with this?
Well, it's I would say, interesting story. It's an idea comes from my co-founder, Alex, one of the co-founders and CTOs of Penta. We were having one of our regular walks. We were like once or twice a month having our walk and talking about tech and life in general. And back in time, he was building a marketplace in a real estate industry. And I was back then at corporate building a marketplace as well, technology for one enterprise marketplace. And Alex was pitching me and saying, hey, now it's 2019 and I'm building this marketplace. And it remembers me on the story when I was building marketplace back in 2000 in Chile. So almost like, as I said, at the beginning of 21st century. And then he started thinking like, throughout these 20 years, he had 5 marketplaces built, and he was saying he sees a pattern. There should be a better way how to build it. And I was like, not sure how, because currently I'm building one, and I built one before. I see common things, but I don't know how to set up that technically actually to make it happen. And then after some deep dive, I realized Alex's ideas. And then he asked me, do I want to join that we start building together? We did some validation, or Alex was performing validations. I quit at SAP, back then my employer, and we joined the forces, started building the tech, got the first investors, first customers, and now we are here still building in the trenches.
Really nice, very interesting. But well, I think you were always trying to be a bit more on the entrepreneurial side, right? And then that hit you that this is the right step to move out of SAP. How was it for you as a transition? I mean, SAP is a really nice company with probably a nice paycheck, with a lot of things set up already, to then diving into the cold water and becoming a founder.
Yeah, it's a reality slap, I would say, but you're correct. I was kind of I was trying to start something before. I had a short trip in California when I actually, for the first time, heard of startups and starting your company. As coming from a middle class family, I was kind of really confused that you can start your own business without having a permission, and kind of was, my friend back then was looking at me really weird by asking such a weird questions. And then I kind of realized that's what I want to do, because I managed to articulate what was in me all the time. So I moved back to Germany after California, to Berlin, wanted to start my first startup back then. But then the German immigration office, the famous Ausländerbehörde, was strictly against it. because I was having student residence permit, and they were saying, yeah, as a third world country citizen, you are not allowed to work anything full time next to your studies. Maybe hand in your business plan, and maybe we will give you a permission to start anything. So that's why I kind of finish the studies and continue working. And now back to the questions: how was the flash from going to the nice paycheck to the startup world? It was in a way expected, because I was waiting for that the years before that to get from bureaucracy perspective ready. But what was really new back then is the emotional roller coaster that goes with it when you're completely full in the trenches and not building something on the side. And yeah, with the support of the co-founder and the culture we have in our company, it was possible to overcome it, and we are still there. It's not an easy thing. I would say it's I don't want to scare off people. It's not like something you do as a side thing. It's a tough job to do with a lot of unknowns, with you having to figure it out. But that's the game. If you like the game, I think you should play.
But I find it really cool that you mentioned this as a first thing, because I fully agree. I think the emotional roller coaster, or the general roller coaster that leads to also an emotional roller coaster of running a startup is pretty intense. And I think, I don't know how you experience it, but I think it's on several different levels. It's one is potentially financing rounds or getting enough customers. Then the next thing is, does the tech work out? Does the people management work out? All of these different things that suddenly you have to manage. Or what do you think is the toughest for?
Yeah, there are a lot of concerns you have to think of, but as one of the tech nerds, and Alex as well, one of the big two tech nerds, beside randevu.tech, we are not having any thoughts about the tech. So that's one thing that we have 100% under our control. But everything else was a challenge, from the customer acquisitions, knowing how to do sales, then being so deep in the tech and not having to get out of it and communicate, I would say, normally and regularly to non-tech people what we're doing. That was one of the challenges. And of course, financing. When we started, it was Corona time. The VC industry was already dropping. The investments were going down. So it was the really challenging time for the fundraising. So, and from our perspective, back then we were also, I would say, rookies in fundraising. We also did all possible mistakes, and it was not an easy thing. Yeah, listening to no's, but from friends, fellow founders, listening their stories, I was kind of expecting it to happen. So I would say I was kind of prepared, but still, it's different when you're. It's a different when you're in the trenches and when you just hear the story.
Yeah, agreed. So perhaps let's go a bit into the question on this transition from SAP to startup. And I mean, there's certainly quite a few listeners that are not in the startup world or not in the early stage startup world, and I think this is probably quite something when it comes to how things are done. Did it feel easy, or was it completely different, or did your working style change?
Definitely. So a lot of things changed. The most important thing that changed, that was one of the biggest lessons learned for me, is the timing of the building. So at SAP, when we're developing something, and also not an easy things that were being developed, also complex stuff, you do not have this, I would say, concern of surviving. Yes, you have a budget, you have a deadline, you have time frame, but you work under pressure, but there is no such huge pressure that if you're late, everything is going to collapse. So that means that you have more time for proper thinking and proper engineering stuff at big corporates, while at startups, you have to make it going, and then in the next step, iterate it. So kind of always balancing the timing between what's being developed right now, what's being postponed for being developed later, and trying to optimize the usage of time. Because at the end, what you have is time, and you don't and that's the most precious thing that you have, and you have it. It's limited, very limited. So really setting priorities on what's being developed is the tough part. And one of my co-founders says, yeah, he has more than 20 years of experience. He was really, and still is really great in that, helping on challenging what can be postponed for development and what can be developed and what should be developed right now. So I would say this aspect of timing is one of the most crucial factors that changes the style of building software.
And I guess then the other side is probably product, right? I mean, and product management that needs to decide as well what the priorities. And I mean, you have a very technical product, but at the same time, you need to have product management, and priorities probably also comes from customer feedback.
Of course, you have as a developer in a big corporate, you have only your tech responsibilities. As a startup founders, tech responsibility is only one of so many. Of course, you have to think of the product. You have to think of the customers, of customer support, of efficiencies, and all that. I would say non-obvious stuff that I would also say techs do not appreciate a lot when they don't have to do it themselves. But it was also a learning. But the biggest learning for me, from tech perspective, back to original question, is this aspect of timing. Another buzzword for that is lean development, and developing only what's required the proper time and on what's being used. And one easy, I would say, not really a KPI, but one easy compass to orient yourself is you could always ask what's currently in production from source code perspective and what is being used. And I met a lot of tech founders that have a lot of stuff in productions, but only like 10% of their product is being used. So that means it's cool, it works, but nobody's using it. So they wasted literally their time building stuff which are not needed.
There's a really priority.
Yes, and it's really tough. It's really tough, especially if you're a perfectionist and you want really to make it awesome and great and everything's perfect. Then it's really tough to fight yourself and say, okay, this can be postponed, this can be removed, this could be, you know that feature is not complete, you know that only implement 10% of the feature, but you know that you can do this, but you can put other parts, but you can also postpone it for later. And that postponing for later, if that will not kill you, it's probably better to postpone it and do other stuff burning, and that could kill you.
And I mean, there's the other question of scalability now. I mean, at SAP, you build for billions of dollars, so for the whole economy. But as a startup, you have your customers, and then do you ship features that are not done to the highest quality, or how would you generally go about that?
I want to say it's about the highest quality. It's about the scope of the features which are there. Of course, it's important stuff is also you have proper architecture. So if you have architecture in place that can grow, that you have open doors, of course you're going to have some tech debt that you have to fix on the long. But if you're aware of the tech debt that you're having and managing, then you can fix it. The difference is that the timing as well. So when you're building a big company, you start immediately with developing something which is scalable, because you have time and resources, and that probably will be only used in scalable manner several years down the road, and then you will notice, oh, what we built 4 years ago is actually not scalable anymore, then you have to fix it. And in the startup is building it scalable enough for the next phase, and the next phase is probably half year and a half, and then at the same time balancing the tech debt, unlocking that scalability further, and adding new stuff. So it's this balance of finding, because you can build something scalable today, you can spend 2 months building something, and then you have customer that has 10 customers. So I met a founder that was rolling MVP with Kubernetes and microservices, and they had 10 users, and they will not have more than 100 users next 2 years. So that doesn't make sense. Okay. It's waste the time to build something that will never be used. It was fun. It was for them as a tech joyful, but it's totally out of sync with the business goals.
That means making the tech decisions in a way that you don't have blockers for the future to scale, but that you accept a certain tech debt and build it for the scale of the next year, let's say. Then afterwards, potentially for more scaling and no blockers there. That's important.
Yes, so it's the lean at the proper time, proper things. Otherwise, you're wasting your time and resources. There are probably way more important stuff that have to be done, identified, than building something which is not being used. You know, why simple feature is like I would also say counterintuitive. People roll out their MVP and they have the delete feature. You know, maybe you can open an account and you can delete your account, and they postpone their go live, their first release, with waiting for implement the delete feature, but they don't have anyone that can use that. You know, so why implement that first? Wait for first customers when they want delete feature, then you add it, because there are other stuff which are more critical at the point of time.
Yeah. Okay. So really prioritization. That's kind of like an absolute core when making this transition from corporate to startup.
Yes, and I would say it's also, but on that, it's really tough. So what I see a lot of business founders that they have a lot of mistakes they make. They use or they search for the best developer to take the CTO role, and the best developer, in my experience, is usually not thinking of the business at all. That person is not time aware, is not budget aware. It's in love with tech, which is okay. That's passion. I'm also in love in tech. I love to use it. It's fun. It's joyful, but it's inappropriate for the phase and for the business development. And my advice, general broad advice for business founders, is usually try to find the tech that failed in business for your co-founder than having a great tech, because the founder that failed in business will have learned those mistakes and will think of the business first and try to find a way to technically enable you to do the business, and not spend time using the most modern new tech, fancy tech, which is fun and cool to use, but not at that point of time.
Yeah, I think one of the most crucial topics, because especially perhaps for listeners that are not on the tech side of starting a company, something that can drive you crazy and lead to the company failing in the end. So I think it's really important to make sure that the business side works out.
I can say that now, I learned it the hard way when I was building my marketplace business. We spent tremendous amount of time to roll out some pipeline, some fancy API, not to go into details. And then there was a whole nighter fixing to have it ready, with a lot of time spent. And then we went to our customer. It's a business sitting in Charlottenburg, less than Berlin. And we demoed, like, now we want to get him to acquire that business as a customer, demoed. And that business was like, wow, Filip, I love your API. I love how you develop the pipeline. I was kidding. That person did not give up damn about the tech. That person was asking if his competitor from Köpenick is in the business. And that's all he was caring about. None of it. And for me, that was like a stab in my heart, because as a tech guy, he didn't value that at all. And then for me, it was like, okay, I needed a day or two to recover from that slap. That everything with it was cool, it's awesome, but nobody cares about it at that point of time. It was totally a waste of time.
Yeah. But look, I think it's good that you made the learnings. It's always good for the next company then.
Yes.
So that leads to this question about tech and non-tech teams working together. How do you manage that? Because in the end, you need to listen to your customers, right? So who listens to them, and how does this feedback end up on the tech side or product side?
Because we're currently still not so big in size of the employees. We try to have both techies, because 2 of 3 co-founders are techies, tech nerds. So we try that always one of the tech sides is in there, talking to customers and listening to customers, and also to prospects, and also other business people that we have that join those calls. So it's a bit of, I would say, not optimized way of using time, but it's also learning from business people immediately listening from tech assessments and assessing what's feasible and what's not feasible in what time span.
Very good. So you say the more early stage you are, the more important it is that as a CTO, you're really deep involved, listening yourself to customers and understanding the business side and really getting that feedback in.
Yes. So we also have a split that now it's me talking to customers, listening to their feedback or even complain sometime, and their wishes and their problems, and then trying to also their solutions, because customers always comes with their solutions, which is also one of the learnings, is not to listen to solutions, but try to dig the why and the problem behind, because at the end, as an engineer, you're there to make the solution and not to implement the solution which was proposed by the customer. Of course, sometimes it happens, but usually if you dig behind the why and the why and the why of that solution and the why of the problem and the why, you actually find out the problem, and then you can think of the solution which is feasible within the product strategy of the company or the strategy, and then offer something.
And how to implement it. Perhaps there's any
yes,
cross feature for someone else to another problem or something like that.
Exactly. And usually there is mostly an easier way how to solve that problem, way more elegantly, not sometimes way more cheaper for the customers. They also have with some ideas when they have some customization stuff and want to do something on their side, they ask for advice, they have with some ideas, and then you can cut that at 50% less and say there's way simpler solution for that problem. It's going to cost you less, and invest your money in business development instead of doing that solution. Some people say it's crazy, you're not taking money from your customers, you let them keep the money, but I think in the long term it's more beneficial, because then that customer also becomes more successful. If the customer is more successful, you're also more successful.
Yeah. So that leads me to a question. I mean, a lot of people tend to productize anything that their customer needs, but some stuff can also be done manual. No, what is your opinion between that?
Yes, I also, it was one of the learnings as I would say the learning from entrepreneur and a tech nerd is, so tech nerd, you want to automate everything. You spend this 5 hours to automate this 1 minute thing is usually the saying. And I would say kind of the okayish rule is, I would say 3-time rule. If you have to do it 3 times manually and it takes you more than an hour time, then probably it makes sense to think of automating. And always under constraint of time and money, because when you start, if you have enough time, you have enough money, cool, somebody's going to set it and automate. But if you're always trying to survive the next years, do it manually first, because if you do it manually first, you also learn it what you need. Because a lot of time you have the ideas how to automate something, and then you automate it, then you learn it, you automated the wrong thing. And it's better to have things running manually than automated than to have things running automatically which are not running at all. And it's usually the case from my experience and from other experiences. And I think it's counterintuitive, really counterintuitive. A lot of people say you have to automate everything immediately. But my lesson learned, and also thanks to my co-founder, it was also his experience. He was opening the eye, do it manually. And when you see it's doing sort of manual, then automate it. Don't waste time on that right now.
Yeah, I think really interesting, and I fully agree. I think something that we recently looked into is another topic that we see as a startup always, is the question on estimating time to build something or understanding how it will be built, because this whole problem of having this ununderstandable topic ahead of you, and I think you got a bit into one direction of something that we're doing, is like the more you do it manual, the more you go step by step, the more you understand the complexity of something, the more you can scope how should it be solved that it is feasible to do it with a certain time. Do you have what is your approach when you take a new feature or a new problem that you want to solve with tech, to understand how long it might take or how to approach it?
It depends. If it's something that was done a lot of time before and it's really clear scope and and do really clear path, then it's easy to estimate it. But if something is not done, if you're doing it for the first time, it's usually not about estimating. It's usually about managing customer expectations and trying and building the trust and telling them that it cannot really be estimated. And it's not the idea to take you the money. It's the idea more to inform the customer, to educate the customer how that works. Sometimes it does not work because the customer thinks, okay, these guys are giving me 5 times the estimation required than the other guys, which are doing it 5 times faster, and then end up with going with the other person and then end up doing it 15 times longer because they're in the game. So it's mostly about educating the customers about the estimation, in my opinion, and trying to give more as a relative time frames with the best case, which is usually never going to happen, and what's more reality, kind of best case. If none of the expectations, non-surprising happens, this should be the case, but I'm expecting surprises and we're going to learn them together on the way.
Okay, cool. Perfect. We're almost at the end already. So for my last question, do you have any advice that you would give other technical leaders, any books, resources, or anything else that you would say should definitely be listened, read, or watched?
I would say there are a lot of really well-known resources that I guess a lot of people read, but I would say after you start building it and going through that experience, reread them again, because you're gonna look at them differently. So, for example, Lean Startup. Yeah, I was reading the Lean Startup, and I was so sure I'm not gonna make those mistakes, and then I made those mistakes, and then I read it again. I was like, oh my god, I can't believe it. This was me. And I thought it's only me, but then listening from more experienced people, I learned they made the same mistake. So it's one thing reading and then going to the trenches. One other thing is going to the trenches and then reading. And my approach would be try to do it in parallel. I know it's really difficult because of the time, but if you do it in parallel, it's, I would say, most valuable.
Very interesting and very good feedback. I like it, and I couldn't agree more. I think the second time around, the third time around, I take out a book and experience it in between. Changes my perspective completely.
Yeah, so I was also like on advice on that perspective. I was that person 10, 15 years ago. I was making that mistake. Before starting to do something, I was trying to read and research everything on that, and I could quote every book and site and mistakes and stuff and cool. But then when I was about to do it, I was like, okay, I know how it should be done, but how to do it actually. And I actually like the one analogy is like you want to learn to play the basketball, and then you learn, how to shoot the basket. You learn this is how your body movements should be. This is how fast you should throw the ball. This is the angle, and you learn those things. You read this. You look all the YouTube videos, all the stuff. And after 6 months of reading, you know all the theory, how it should be done. And then you go to the court, you try to shoot, and you not even get the right direction. So basically, try shooting yourself, and then try reading in parallel. Will kind of be the advice. And don't make the mistake.
Super cool. Yeah. Well, most people do. I did myself. I regularly do myself as well. And I think it counts the same for talking to people. I think you hear some feedback from people, but then re-listening or asking them again when you're in the situation helps a lot. And we tend to forget that. Thank you so much, Filip. It has been really great that you've been here as a guest in this podcast, joining us today. Super insightful, very valuable for everyone. I bet if anyone is interested, I'm sure that they can check out randevu.tech and of course also reach out to you on LinkedIn. Then thank you for everyone listening in to today's Top Tech Leaders podcast. Please hit the subscribe button, leave a quick review. It helps us a lot with getting our podcast in front of the eyes of people. So thank you very much, Filip. Until next time, keep coding, keep leading.
Thank you for having me, Marc.